My mother was a huge reader. My house was full of books. My father quoted poetry. So it was just there. And I think probably the most vivid memory of my childhood is being told, Robyn, put that book down. Because I read all the time. I would read the cornflakes packet at breakfast time because I just had to read. It was almost a compulsion. And I think from that and from reading hundreds and hundreds of books, I then became interested in writing as well. And I started writing bits and pieces, shocking stuff when I was quite young. I remember the first thing I sent away was when I was 15 to the Women's Weekly. They were very, very kind. I got a lovely letter back from them that said, you know, this was a very nice attempt, and I've really been really grateful to the woman who wrote that because she was so encouraging. And when I saw it years later, it was just so bad. But it was sort of the first time I really did some writing. I did used to write stories before that with girlfriends. Like I remember being on a girl guide camp and in a tent telling stories and things like that, or writing stories and reading out my stories. They were all love stories at that stage, of course. I tried that again when I got older, and I was so bad at it. But the passion for children's, I think, probably came because I spent all my life with children. I went almost virtually from school, had my own children in my 20s, and then went teaching, and I taught, and I've done nothing but been in education ever since. Not always in the classroom, and not always as a classroom teacher, but I've been teaching ever since. And I've been teaching English, and only English. One of those very lucky teachers who came out of university said I only want to teach English, and I was allowed to. So nobody ever said, you know, you're taking the maths class. I always taught English, predominantly year 11 and 12 English. So that built up a great love for literature again, and for good literature. But I also was really concerned as I got later through the school time that children were not reading enough. There were some who read regularly and read all sorts of things. There were others who would be, it was almost a matter of pride, so I've never read a book. And I found that really worrying. And I think what inspired me in the end to get into children's books was when I saw the reaction of children to Harry Potter. And then I suddenly saw what a writer could do. Now, I'm not there yet, but it was just wonderful to see children lining up to get books. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have a go at this. And so I started about 10 years ago. So I went from being a school teacher to a school principal, and then to an education consultant. And in that time, I worked in almost all states of Australia. I worked in Papua New Guinea and Indonesia, so I'd sort of had a lot of look at what children were doing, and what I found interesting was that in schools in the Pacific, the young children there loved books, and they begged to have books. I remember reading a lovely story about a young man in Africa, and the teacher found him with this huge physics book. Now the boy couldn't even read. He was in his teens and he couldn't even read. And she said to him, why are you reading that book? And he said, I just wanted to have my own book. And he carried around this physics textbook, so he had a book to carry. And it just sort of, all those things sort of all came together and gave me this passion for, I really, really would like to write books that children will want to read. And so about 10 years ago, I started just fiddling a little bit, not sending them off to publishers or anything like that, but just writing. And then I discovered that I really loved it. So I guess if I go back to why I read and why I write, it was just there in some ways. You know, I was born with that love of reading. I have wonderful memories of the books I read when I was a child. I still am in awe of Enid Blyton, even though some of them are not politically correct anymore. I think that she was so clever at getting children to enjoy reading. I love writers like Roald Dahl, who's just so clever at drawing you in and you want to know what happens next. And so I think reading those, and I still read all those children's books, and enjoying them and thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could actually write books that children would want to read? And so that's what made me really get involved. I didn't want to write books that had sad issues in them. I like happy endings. I like books that have got hope in them. I like books where the children win. I like the idea of showing children being independent and being resilient, and when things are bad and things go wrong, they work it out between them. And I think that life's much harder for kids than it did when I was young, and I think if we can give them books where they have the enjoyment, they see that actually life's lots of fun, childhood is lots of fun, I think that's not a bad thing either. And so aside from wanting to write books, I wanted to write books that children found hopeful and happy, not books that might have made them feel a bit bad about themselves or bad about their situation and so on. So that was another thing that was part of it.